What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the miserable, melancholy, muttering masochist here, and we're back with episode 68 of the video game therapy series. Yep, back today to talk about more nonsense with myself, because that is what this is all about. So the first topic is a bit, I'm not going to say controversial, because I feel like at a certain point that doesn't really mean anything anymore. But it has a more negative, pejorative sense socially than other topics I talk about. And that is that of objectification. Now, generally, the way this is thought of socially, at least in the US, is the first word that comes to my mind when someone says objectification is generally followed by objectification of women, meaning that women are just reduced to their sexual function. And this is people that or the idea really that women should, on the swimsuit models or whatever that are being sexualized or porn or whatever it is that is objectifying women is a bad thing, and is that's certainly not what I'm arguing against either. I'm not bringing that up, but I began to think about objectification on a more meta level, meaning, so if we, again, I don't mean to create the whole double standard where it's like, oh well, if we're going to look at bodybuilders, objectify them, then what's the difference between a swimsuit model? That's not what I'm talking about. I mean more so of that, even that the objectification of your hands to flip burgers and make money. Your hands kind of become this means to an end, really, that could be objectified, right? Like let's say you're, I don't know, a strong guy and you can lift boxes, right? In some ways it's objectifying you in the sense that you're merely just an object to lift boxes, and your value is stored on that. Now, obviously, that there's a lot more nuance to that than just, you're like, someone that just moves boxes, and that's your entire identity. But I began to think about this as like, what about even the human brain? Like, in some ways, isn't that just a means to an end? And that's kind of what the premise of objectification is, and why it's seen as negative, is that, oh, you're objectifying XYZ because you just see it as a means to an end. Which in that case, if that's the way we're looking at objectification, or the way it can be described, isn't the human mind just an object that solves problems for you? Isn't it always kind of a means to an end at that point? So I suppose really draw the line between what is objectification and what's not. Because if we limit it to something like, let's say, sexual objectification, there's obviously still a double standard with women and whatnot, but regardless, that kind of limits out like your hands being an object or your brain being an object. But I just think it's not really thorough to say that your hands is like, let's even say like, I don't know, you're someone that puts in like railroad spikes or something all day. You're kind of just really the object of something that drives in railroad spikes all day. And some, I guess, men, I suppose, take pride in their, objectification. I'm sure if I went to the gym and somebody who, obviously, whether they're on steroids or not, it doesn't really matter, but someone had a great physique and I went up to him and I said, hey, you got a great physique. I'm sure that, took a lot of effort or whatever. Or even if he, had good genes and it was easy for him, regardless, it's still nobody's going to be offended by that. And you certainly would get, you get pepper sprayed if I walked up to a woman in a gym and said, oh, nice figure or something, which honestly, that's a pretty rizless, rizless way to go about doing things. I'm sure there's a way to say it that's a lot more subtle, but I just began to think about in what ways are we objects beyond just our bodies? Because sure, our bodies are means to an end, meaning that the sexualization of women and even men to a lesser extent, but to women, is really because of their function for sex and for producing children, I suppose, is that's like the means to an end. But even like our hands are kind of a means to, our feet are a means to an end, like our legs moving us to somewhere is always a means to an end. And even in our brains, solving problems are a means to an end. And I suppose some ways you can boil all the means to an end down to something as stupid as money. I just really think it then begins to devalue what objectification are we even talking about? And I suppose it just, I would err on the side of just avoiding, I guess, being offended by objectification at all. Like in the same way that you wouldn't be offended if I was like, wow, your brain is really good at solving these problems. I wouldn't be like, well, you're objectifying my ability to solve these specific problems. In the same way you'd be offended if like someone, oh, like you have a great physique. Like I'm sure that you're a great bed or whatever. But I don't know. I just think objectification might have a wider purview than we tend to give it. And upon looking at it through that lens, it begins to seem silly that we are, I don't know, offended by any amount of objectification. Yeah, so because men certainly, I don't think you'll find a guy, at least I'm going to speak as a median male here. I don't think you'll find a guy that, no matter how shallow of a compliment, he'll never would be like, well, you just like me because like my family's rich or something. Like there's no, I feel like there's generally Western men do not give a shit about that. And they're happy to be objectified in that sense, right? To be used as a means to an end. And I'm not just bashing on people that are women in the idea of objectification women. I just think it's an interesting concept to apply that to the physical body, like the arms and the legs. Like those are all objects that do a certain task. And same with brain. My brain is an object that does certain things. And in a lot of ways, just as robotic as we might, the processes that produce a baby or to have sexual intercourse as humans, the processes are sometimes just as automatable as cognitive processes are equally apt to that effect. Meaning that we've seen even just with super rudimentary large language models, we can emulate this, quote unquote, intellectual behavior, where, some time ago it would have been like, wow, this is like someone applying the brain, but really it's not, there's not really any unique problems that they're solving. It's kind of just as route as, I don't know, driving in railroad spikes. So I don't know. I think it's just kind of an interesting idea to apply objectification outside the realm of our physical bodies, because I would certainly get pepper sprayed if I walked up to somebody and go, oh, you have a nice figure. I would pepper spray myself if I said that, but regardless, it's just still interesting to think that we somehow get offended by that. At least some people do on some levels. And I'm not sure there's something of mine that you could objectify to make me, feel like a tool that would offend me, right? Because I realize in some sense, everything that I do and say and can be or whatever is all a tool in some sense, in the same way that my body might be used as a tool, or my hands or my brain, or a female's body or their hands or their brain, right? It all kind of applies in a very similar sense. So I'm not sure. It's just an interesting concept to think about some more. So yeah, let's see. Here's another interesting idea. I'm sorry, I took a drink of my beverage. Generally in one's life, you try to find this, I won't say like balance. I suppose that's one kind of way of thinking about it, but we kind of try to establish these regulatory norms, so to speak, or like the way I've done things or the way I do things. So it's, for example, it might be, oh, I want to get a job that I'll work. And this is just a sample. Don't feel like this is I'm not ragging on anyone for this. This is the archetypical life structure, is that someone will get some kind of job or some kind of way to make money. And they'll do that nonstop, really, from, I don't know, whenever they're, 20 or something, or 18, until, whenever they can retire. Maybe that's 40 years, maybe that's 30 years. We don't ever really think about, maybe they'll take like a sabbatical if they're a professor or something similar, but they often don't like intentionally structure like, I guess out years. So the way I'm thinking about this is in years versus out years. So like, suppose you, instead of saying, well, I'm just going to get a job and work it for 5 years and then, keep going, you get some corpo job that pays a lot. You live below your means for, let's say, those 2 years you work that job. And then the third year is when you'd have like let's say a financial out year, whereas you wouldn't work any job. You would just kind of, I don't know, one way to think about it is you lock yourself in a cabin somewhere and write a book or something. And I guess that really applies to this project thinking, where if you have a singular sole creative focus, it makes a lot more sense to frame it like these in years and out years. But if you're doing something that isn't really, never really requires any extreme action, perhaps it's less useful. But I think about, we could have financial in years and out years, even like social in years and out years. So you could have, suppose 2 years where you're going to be living near a bunch of people that and you're going to make a point to, I don't know, get dinner with somebody different twice a week, I don't know, something like that. And then maybe you'd have time where, you're going to go live in a cabin in the woods or mountains or something for a whole year. And I just think it's perhaps a more interesting approach to life, because generally we're so set on trying to find structure, and there's kind of safety in that structure. And I've talked at length about we live our lives in fear in some sense. I don't want to rehash that whole spiel, but really it's interesting to me just to think of potential in years and out years, where in years I would be kind of in the mix of things, and then out years I would be kind of doing my own thing. And I would never, of course I say this now, but times change, but I would never be one to just go, I want to write a book. That's not really my thing. I don't hate writing, but I don't really write. I don't enjoy writing, especially weird fiction novels or whatever these people write. And the other part, the part that pisses me off about books that people write is that so many of them are so focused on achieving a certain girth of a book that they don't bother to suggest that perhaps whatever story information they're providing does not warrant anywhere near the number of pages that they're allocating for this book. I can't tell you the number of books that I've read that could have been 2 paragraphs. And sure, yeah, there's something to be said about restating something and putting more time into it. But even the ideas themselves are so limited in scope that you're wasting everyone's time and the paper, and by dragging this on for 70 pages. And I guess that's just more of a separate beef with writers who suck. But regardless, I can only think of, for some reason, when I think of going to live, taking an out year, for example, and going to live in the mountains somewhere and to write a book, that I would write some bloated shit book that would be way too many pages, and it really should be could be way more succinct than that. So I don't know. But I think especially suppose you're a musician and you want to make an album, it's one strategy might be to try to make it alongside of the rest of your life. Let's say you're like a barista or a waiter or something, and so you're going to spend your evenings and weekends working on this album of yours. The other option would be to, I don't know, work 2 jobs, I suppose, because that's normal now, and do that for 2 years and don't even touch the music. And then, once you can save enough, once you've saved up, once you live below your means, presumably, and you're able to live independently for that 3rd year, or the 3rd and 4th year, that's when you would create the album. So I really kind of see it as an avenue for, to bring it back to my last episode, craftsmen or creatives of type, because creatives by nature, I think, are craftsmen. I don't think there are many people who create, or artists who create for art's sake, that are not at least trying to be craftsmen of their, experts or higher quality producers of their craft. No one wants to be like a shitty low, there's not a whole lot of money really, or even glory in shitty low tier art. I think all the glory and promise of art or creative work is in, this person is heralded as a creative genius, right? That's kind of the label one wishes to have under that. So you don't really get there by not being a craftsman of your craft. I don't know. I kind of view the in years and out years as a very interesting concept, because it's very averse to the way things are generally structured. outside of even like the closest thing I think of is like sabbatical, really, for academics. And that's, you don't really get that until, I don't know, you're on tenure and you've been there for 40 years and you've earned your keep. But I'm even thinking as younger people who, want to have these in years and out years, it's not the dumbest thing in the world. Again, it is riskier because you'd have to, leave your job, whatever. But I don't really care that much about the logistics of it. I'm thinking more about the philosophical and creative, practical approaches to what happens with that versus like the financial, practical considerations. So anyway, it's just still thought it was an interesting idea. Something else I had never heard of. And this is totally jumping topics, but that's what I do in these things. is that of an autodidact or an automath, and these are like, I suppose it's something I kind of think everybody should be in some sense, but they're like self-learned people, right? So let's say like the programmer who dropped out of middle school or something and learned programming, taught themselves programming, or herself, whatever. They'd be considered like an automath, someone that does not have the conventional educational specs of someone else. And I really think it's kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of sad to think there's even a word for this, because I feel like it should be such a integral part of human nature that we, like, education, quote unquote, might end, but learning should never. And that's kind of my philosophy around, learning. I think there shouldn't ever, I think the day when you no longer desire to learn anything is when your soul has died. To be, blunt and, I don't know, to use some ghoulish overkill, but your soul has died if you're no longer curious about learning anything. And I think I am concerned that people that have that thinking, I don't know, chronically, I feel like this should be, everybody in some sense should be an automath, teaching themselves something all the time. And sure, I guess some people just don't have the same curiosity about the world, which I guess is fine, but what else are they doing? I don't know, just like distracting themselves, or I mean, I don't know, even if I just can't really, it's hard for me to fathom. Maybe this is just a lack of perspective on my part, but it's hard for me to fathom, beyond just being burnt out, beyond oblivion, a sense where I'm not striving for any kind of personal improvement in terms of learning something new or adding something to my proverbial tool belt, or even just, asking questions. I mean, because even think about like something like something as dumb as celebrity gossip that I would never care about. There's still like an element of curiosity that underlies that, right? Like, oh, what did so and so say to who? And the people that might not, of course, be teaching themselves calculus or Russian or something like that, but still ask the questions about celebrity gossip. So surely there's not a curiosity as a holistic concept has not befallen them. They're not no longer curious about anything at all, ever. It's simply that they're not curious about learning about the natural world or about really anything beyond blatantly surrogate information like celebrity gossip, right? I just can't imagine anything less practical, and I guess in my eyes less interesting, but to them it seems interesting. Because I guess the one way that I could take that in some sense of like, okay, maybe they like it because it teaches them about human psychology or sociology or something. But then you'd think that they would spend more time. Again, I'm talking about the people that follow celebrity gossip, and I think that these things that they'd spend time like trying to understand the human mind, right? And they'd be even philosophers in their own right. They just would instead of using scientific or other weird other examples, they would just use examples from, I don't know, Love Story or Love Island or something like that, to draw their philosophies from. But I don't know. I suppose it's just an entirely different perspective, and it's one that I don't really understand. If you're not just curious about anything, right? Part of this, I guess the reason that I'm having trouble speaking about this is that I kind kind of believe almost to blindly that it's not, no person is just like, oh, is not curious about anything. It's either something that is beaten out of them by I don't know, educational institutions or society or work or whatever, and where they just kind of give up. I don't think it's something that they lose the interest in learning about, why the hell are you here? What is the world? What is this? What are we doing? Right? I feel like those questions should linger in everyone's mind. People either choose to just ignore them and fill their mind with celebrity gossip or something. Again, or the question asking part of them has been beaten out of them by educational institutions. And it's obviously no secret that I'm not a huge fan of structured, formalized education. Even as someone who's been through what I'd say is the ringer when it comes to formalized education. But regardless, I don't, that never hampered my interest in learning things. I think I was almost robustly anti-authoritarian to the extent that I did not care whether or not this was like part of the curriculum or even that this was even related. I don't care. I just wanted to figure something out because, I don't know, maybe it was a whole vanity project. I just wanted to prove that I could do it, right? Which is I think really half of the whole curiosity learning part is just, can I prove to myself that I'm even capable of doing this? Because I don't know. And who knows, maybe I just don't have the chops for it. Right. But I would never figure that out, watching Love Island or something dumb. So I suppose that's why I was always opted for, I don't know, not accepting the okay, well, this is how it works. That's it. It's like, well, no, I don't care who these people are telling me this. And I suppose if you really have a reverence for authority and, your dad just told you once that storks are God or something, and then now you haven't questioned it ever. Right, I suppose that's because it's your fault for respecting authority in them, and the people telling you that not being as intellectually humble as they should have been. And that's something I try to carry with me regardless, even if I do learn something, to still have a healthy, if not abundant, amount of humility, in the sense that I could be totally wrong. And who knows? With the information I have to assume that I know as little as possible. Well, I'm never going to assume that I know 80% about something or even 20% about something. It might be better for me to assume I know 1%, right? But of course I could be talking to someone that knows 0.0001%, so my 1% is a lot. So I don't know. At a certain point, those numbers become so, the limit approaches infinity, so you don't really get, it doesn't really end up being a useful conversation if we're talking about the percentage of knowledge about a certain topic. So I'll move on. So I don't know. My next topic, I just wrote respect random son in my little text document over here. So thinking about, I guess, free will or decision making, right? And the difference fundamentally between computers making decisions and humans making decisions. We can program computers to act randomly. Of course, that doesn't really scratch our itch conceptually in terms of make a human-like program. Otherwise, our large language model will be powered off of complete randomness and not stochastic randomness, which is the way they're powered now. It's stochastic in nature, but it's not really random in the sense, but it's stochastically driven. So they kind of use aggregate numbers to drive those models. Regardless, so as we're speaking about, like, I guess the example that I thought was helpful was like, you ask a robot, let's say we're back in middle school or something, and you're trying to decide whether or not to ask this girl to the dance or something. You could give a robot all the information available, right? The demographics, like the history of the conversations, transcripts of the information, even like, verbal, physical, social cues that might point you in a direction of yes or no. And one way to look at it is it's really impossible to enumerate the total number of factors at play and whether or not, this person's going to ask this other person to the dance, right? You're going to ask this girl to the dance. It's impossible to know whether or not you're going to do that beforehand, like to predict it, because there are essentially an infinite number of choices. And I guess one way to do it would be to get the information you have, and then the human brain just kind of makes a random decision, you know. And perhaps it's something that's based in logic, like I don't know, the wind blew you subconsciously in that direction, you know, when she was there or something. I don't know, there's all numbers of ridiculous extrapolations you can make when speaking about, you know, could we have predicted this person to make this decision? But ultimately, there comes down to a comparison of randomness between computer random versus human random, and the encroachment of infinity when it comes to the number of factors at play. And I think the problem I have with a lot of, you know, I'll just call them accelerationists, but that's probably not what they are, but people that kind of peddle tech as these answers. Well, if we had more information, if we had all the information, I just don't think it is possible, logistically or other, to acquire all the information necessary. You know, and I guess because of the butterfly effect, really, you know, for example, you know, could we factor in, you know, their cousin who lived in India, who stubbed their toe that morning, who ended up in the hospital, who called their mom, who, you know, through 10 other activities ended up affecting the decision that we made in some small town USA. Like, could any computer even reasonably understand, like a computer could, but humans in even organizing and assembling all that information would require a world I don't want to live in. You know, a full surveillance state as well as calculable, but we can't calculate infinity. We can't even comprehend it, which I think is why humans should find their limit and reach their limit and stay there. Meaning that, like, inherently, the human brain is limited in its scope. I mean, we obviously know that people are morons, so it's not like we're these perfectly infallible things. We're obviously really stupid. As a species, myself included. I'm not excusing myself in any way. But regardless, we tend to think that we have this, like, this unlimited capacity to do anything, like, always. And it's like we can't even comprehend like truly random numbers or infinite numbers. And of course computers can, but then at a certain point, you know, in order for us to do what we want to do in terms of controlling random numbers or infinite numbers, we have to cede control over to you know, robot overlords that can make those decisions, because our brains are incapable of comprehending that, both in terms of scale and of conception, right? We can reason by analogy to think about things that are infinite or numbers that are completely random, but we're unable to directly conceptualize that. So again, that's kind of very nebulous, a wordy thing to say. And of course, language in itself is very limited in how I'm able to articulate this, but I hope it isn't, I'm not being too off base when it comes to how I'm describing this whole phenomenon. But I don't know. I just think to a certain point we need to, you know, my starting point with this was respect random, son. But I think we need to respect the human randomness factors at play. So going back to the should I ask this girl on a date example, we should respect that we will never, this is in our eyes an infinite number of butterfly affected factors that we will never be able to calculate, and we should just respect the random of it. Right? So respect random, son. That's kind of why that's why I wrote that one down. And I think we tend to think that we can harness this, and we lack reverence for randomness, and I suppose I'm advocating on behalf of random, you know. So I think randomness is fine, and randomness and irrationality kind of go, you know, two sides of a similar coin. I think, you know, human rationality and human randomness can be thought of in a lot of the same ways, especially in this example. So, you know, I spoke at length before about the importance of preserving, you know, I'm not saying preserving human irrationality, but preserving humanity. And perhaps we're human because of our irrationality, but regardless, we know that's a fact. We know that's a principle of humanity, and no amount of schooling or drugs or whatever makes us any less irrational, any less random. And maybe it's because we have innate cosmic knowledge, right, about the universe. Perhaps we're all mini gods, and we're all harnessing this own perfect version of random and quantum computing that we'll never be able to match with any computer algorithm, but maybe not. I don't know. Interesting to think about. So I suppose, speaking of God, I'll kind of move on to my next topic. I really don't understand why people, and maybe it just comes back to the whole intellectual humility problem. But I really don't understand why people hate, like, dog on or hate people that are religious. And in some ways because of the religious function, or the function that religion serves. I don't think anyone would argue that it is, I mean, you could say that it's bad in the sense that it's been the cause of major strife, historically, but I don't think that alone is what should be adequate basis to ban something like, Christianity or Muslim or whatever. I think it serves a purpose that we'll be needing more and more as time goes on, because as we're already seeing the death of smaller communities and social groups, and romantic relationships across at least Western countries. Again, I have to speak out of my own context here. Religion historically has been something that served all of those properties very well. Right? You went to, my parents' age, you would go to Sunday school. They were raised Christian, so that kind of answers that. But they would go to Sunday school, and then they would go to class with people they went to church with, and every weekend they would play softball, or whatever. I don't even know. They do all kinds of shit as like a community with them. It's almost like those like Amish people, right? And I don't think anyone's going to be dogging on the Amish people for having a shitty community. It's like no, those people have like fantastic communities. They all and yeah, they're weird, and they all have beards, and they don't use technology, whatever. But there's nothing. I would be a fool if I were to sit there and bash Amish people just because they, for what? Like a lot of them are perfectly happy, right? I'm not saying that we should neuter ourselves technologically just to be happy, but in some sense, I think there's a threshold of technological integration before we encroach on the human levels that it becomes problematic, right? And I guess it comes back to the balancing the computers versus humanity, right? At some point, we have to put humanity first, or not, and we just decide to go full cyberpunk, and we try to augment ourselves, and we lose humanity in the process. And I suppose maybe that makes me, conservative in this, right? In the sense that I think humanity, as it has existed since our inception, should remain in some sense. Meaning I would not be chomping at the bit to inject processors and cybernetics into our bodies. I think there's a certain, I just don't see that socially, philosophically, economically all working out well. I mean, that's obviously one sense, but even if we were able to execute it well, what would be the point? We would become, let's say we'd become perfectly rational, and we'd make all these perfectly rational decisions. Then what? Then we solve all the problems, and then, it's all just, Clockwork Orange. And then, we, nobody wants, I kind of view it as there's that Rick and Morty episode where the dinosaurs took back over, and it was just this utopia. And of course, I'm not saying that I actually think we would enter cyberpunk dystopia long before we'd ever enter any kind of utopia. But suppose that we were able to achieve this utopia. And the funniest part of the whole episode, there's not really much else to it other than the dinosaurs take away all the work for humans to do. Some guy like politely gets up and goes, "Excuse me, I have a question. What do you do when you want to kill yourself?" And I think it just kind of paints the picture we kind of like dealing with our dumb problems, and especially as if we are able to perfect computers to do all of our dumb problems, we won't have any dumb problems to work on. So, and I suppose that you can kind of look at this from an artist's perspective too. I don't make art, I don't make music, I don't make videos, I don't make anything, thinking that it's going to be this perfect mathematical perfection of a work. That's not the point, right? And you know, maybe I'm just trying to express humanity in any of my work, but I don't, there's not even a intention of it being anywhere close to like functionally perfect, memory safe, you know, whatever. No, it's just, this is kind of like, it's not purposely shit either, but it's purposefully like imperfect. And I think if we so we wrote this perfect music piece and everything about the piece of music was perfect and no one had any other reason to listen to anything else because this is a perfect, it's like, that doesn't make any sense, right? And I think that is essentially what we'd end up doing if we were able to trivialize all of our problems, to an extent that we, like the guy said, wanted to kill ourselves. And you know, I kind of see that as the end of what would happen in a cybernetic future. So if we were able to augment ourselves, and people, I think the problem is they actually think too short-sighted with this. Is they're so fixated on the, oh, we could be more logical. People wouldn't litter, and people wouldn't murder, and people wouldn't do this. And I'm not saying that it's great to live in a world where people murder. I'm not saying it's ideal. But I think part of it is it allows the world to, you know, it gives us meat to chew on. If there are murderers and bad people out there and whatever, versus if it, you know, everything was perfect, I think you'd want to murder yourself. So I don't know. I think they're being too short-sighted, the people that are proponents of a cybernetic future, right? And they're so fixated on the cool tech that they could have, you know. Ooh, I could, you know, I could shut my lights off just by thinking about it. It's like, is that really what you want? And you know, I don't know. So I suppose in that sense, I am an old man in the technological sphere, in the sense that I don't want there should be a limit. So I don't know, but I suppose we'll see what philosophy wins out in the end, if we fully embrace all of the shit that we're creating. So I don't know. Not my decision, I suppose. Sorry, take a drink. This other topic that I think is, again, related to the ones I've discussed at length already in this episode is the downfall of the web. I mean, I don't know. For a while, I didn't have any frame of reference, so I knew the internet. You know, maybe post shit, I suppose. My internet was a lot of the big social media sites. I wasn't really around or involved in the internet before that, and when there was like all these, when it was very indie bloggy, you know, when RSS and stuff was big. I was not around for that, so I only really knew, you know, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. I knew that a lot when I was a kid, because that's what was around, and I didn't really realize what we had lost, and it's only now that I'm kind of retreating back and starting from square zero in terms of understanding the history of the internet and the history of technology, that I kind of revel in the fact that we lost all of that, and we kind of this place sucks. Like, the internet sucks. And you know, I use Firefox as my browser, and I have like all these extensions. I have ones that, you know, block the whole cookie banners, and and like all these hoops you have to jump through. And don't even get me started with like CAPTCHA hell, because I get put in CAPTCHA hell a lot, because I use a VPN and I use a user agent scrambler, meaning it just selects a random user agent every time I log in anywhere, or anytime I don't log in any websites, but anytime I access a website, it scrambles my user agent. So it picks, like, it just tells the website I'm on Chrome or something like that. But all these websites like absolutely freak out. Like, if I'm not logged in, like, you know, me not logging in is like, you know, the worst possible scenario for them, because they can't, you know, do whatever. They can't make my experience like, they're just farming my shit. But I think, and look, I can complain ad nauseum about the problems of the modern web, and that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is point some fingers here. Not at people, I think at an idea. The idea that killed the older internet, and the one that I suppose I'm trying to revive in some sense and trying to, I don't know, kind of relish in, is accessibility killed it. Right, the fact that, not accessibility in the sense of like, if you're blind, like, can you just a screen reader or something? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people having access, like these low code, no code website builders result in horrible websites because they abstract, in order for them to achieve any level of scalable support with these platforms, they have to make not only like the bloat part of it, like, yeah, obviously like WordPress and stuff is bloated, but they have to abstract and generalize all of this stuff, and not, and also given the fact that everybody wants website analytics and tracker and all that, it just ends up becoming this absolute hodgepodge of garbage. And I'm guilty of this myself. My first like 3 or 4 websites were all these Create React apps, and it was just like, I mean, yeah, of course, in my stupid naive eyes, I was being minimal because my designs are minimal, but it was a JavaScript app, and like it was static. It's a static website. It doesn't need to be fucking JavaScript. The hell do I need JavaScript for? You know, and I suppose, yeah, I could integrate these crappy Google Analytics and all this other shit that is really user hostile at this point. But for the longest time, I didn't really know any better. And coming around on it, I think what killed a lot of this older internet is, you know, not WordPress specifically, but Squarespace, Webflow, also other stuff that makes things accessible. I'm not saying that it should. There should be more of a. I am saying this. There should be more of a barrier to website and digital content creation than there should be, because lowering the barrier also lowers the quality. And I think that's kind of obvious, right? If there are lowering the barrier for anything is going to allow more shitty people in. So it's like, if you lower the barrier of entry to an elite school, you're probably going to get shittier students. Like, wouldn't that just make sense? Like, how are you going to get better students with looser qualifications, right? In order for it to, if you want better students, you'd probably want stricter things. And obviously, like, that's kind of a crappy example because of how fucked up the whole college admission stuff is. But thinking about it outside of that context, you know, the accessibility is related directly to the quality of whatever you're getting. So the fact that you can go on Squarespace and whip up this crappy website using a template and throw in a bunch of JavaScript and cool, you know, SVG animations, all this other crap that is just completely unnecessary for a good website. There you go. In 10 minutes, you can whip up a shitty, bloated website that will, that'll drive me up a wall and will put me in captcha hell because you require the users to log in as our stuff. And logging in is just, you're just holding your data hostage. I mean, and which is just like, what the hell is wrong with you? It's an evil thing to do on what's supposed to be a free and open internet. So I don't know. I'm kind of a proponent of that, and I really think that that this, kind of uber focus on accessibility to people is the problem. And I think what should be more accessible is learning the basic, like learning WordPress or learning Webflow or learning Squarespace. That is a waste of time. As someone who just spent, an hour fucking around with a WordPress site, that if it was HTML and CSS, even if it had JavaScript in there too, it would take me 5 seconds to fix this, because I know what was wrong with the website. It was like a styling issue, and I would just go into the CSS, I'd find it, and I'd edit the style to make it fit, or I'd add another class and do whatever. But the fact that it was on WordPress and everything was locked behind like 40 layers of this abstraction, and I had to Google these weird settings, like everything, what the fuck? It would be simpler for me to have just used like whatever the actual, to just act the actual raw code itself. I think the problem is that people think that programming, or not even programming, like HTML is just so incredibly difficult that it requires them to use Squarespace or something. I think we should make more accessible the knowledge of how to actually program a website from scratch, from nothing, bare bones, nothing. And it took me a while to even get back to that point. I started at the bloated JavaScript. It took me a while to get moved back all the way to what are the fundamentals, right? And I think that if anything is inaccessible, it is the fundamentals of this knowledge. And that's really what, if more people knew the fundamentals, you'd probably have a lot better websites, because people would know they don't need to have all these weird settings, all this other crap that's present in in a lot of these shitty websites. So I don't know. I honestly think it's easier for anybody, really, and this isn't just me, to learn the basic fundamentals of something than it would be to learn Webflow. I mean, oh my God. I mean, looking back on it now, Webflow is harder than just like actually learning React or learning like just anything. I mean, like it's you're harder. What? You're just learning a proprietary platform. At least WordPress is open source, but still, I think like these web frameworks that make things accessible to the non-technicals is stupid. It's kind of the same argument with Excel and like data sheets. Like Excel, like it's a database, and yes, it's got a little GUI and stuff. But ultimately, like if you want to do anything beyond just like looking at it and you have like 10 little things, you should use an actual database and then a programming language. Just learn SQL queries, or you could learn some Python wrapper for it or something like that. Whatever it doesn't really matter. But to be away from the database because it's a technical thing. It is easier for somebody to actually just learn basic SQL queries than it would be for them to get this huge, textbook on Excel shortcuts. It's like in macros. It's like, what the fuck? Like, this could be accomplished like not even conceptually easier, but like the actual like mechanical requirements of this would be easier if it was just in SQL, like it was actually this database itself. And I don't know. I think people miss that. They think it's like, oh, well, I'm not a technical person, so I can't do that. But they don't realize that it is legitimately more difficult for you to learn Webflow or Squarespace or something than it would be for you to just actually learn HTML. So I don't know. I suppose that's a very specific example, but regardless, it is beyond obnoxious. So yeah, I don't know. Very annoying. Let's see. What else do you want to do? Here's another kind of random. This isn't really a productivity tip, but I suppose you can look at it that way if you want. I was thinking about randomness, and also about like getting stuff done. I talked about it before. Everyone likes getting stuff done, and generally we try to have we invent these to-do lists and frameworks to keep track of what to do. And I got to get this done. I'll have like these, maybe it's a whole timeline thing. I don't know. People have all their own strategies, and I do too. I have my own little strategies for doing everything. But at a certain point, I think one strategy that might actually be interesting for me to try is to kind of adopt this random number approach to things. So it's like, let's say I have 6 tasks to do or 2 tasks to do or something. And instead of me like thinking about what I want to do at that time and like kind of wasting mental energy on, what do I want to do or what do I feel like doing? I just flip the fucking coin, right? I roll a die, right? What am I doing right now? Okay, I number my items 1 through 6 that I want to accomplish, whatever they might be. And then I roll a die. And whatever the die says, I do. And I think it's just an interesting, maybe I should try it actually before I start talking about it too much, but it's an interesting thing to try, to think about. Because again, at a certain point, what do I feel like doing? What am I in the headspace for? All of that, it just kind of ends up impeding you from doing anything. You spend more time thinking about, what's the optimal thing for me to be working on right now, when I just need to be doing something. It doesn't matter what it is. And I don't think I'm in the mood to do anything really, but if I start doing something, I will eventually get in the mood to do it. So I just need to do something. So I think the coin might be the perfect little trigger for me to start doing something, get a move on. Because I do kind of always sometimes suffer from that analysis paralysis mode where I'm so concerned about what I should be doing. I'll make these lists endlessly, and the lists don't do anything but just tell me what to do, but I don't do anything. I'm too busy making lists and, thinking about the list and all this other shit when I should just be doing something. So I don't know. I think maybe there's you should flip a coin and you should make decisions based off the coin. I kind of think, and I never saw this movie, but there's that movie called like Ain't No Country for Old Men or something. I've never seen the movie, but I know that I spoiled it because I watched some stupid YouTube video a long time ago, and it's the other reason I stopped watching YouTube. No, I'm just kidding. But I know that the murderer, would just walk around and flip a coin, and it kind of just speaks to the power of random. And And like I said to begin, you know, respect the random, son. That's the that was the whole intro to my my spiel on randomness. Respect random, and I suppose to be more specific, respect human random, because I think humans don't have reverence for computer generated random. We want human generated random. So like, you know, everything that we do is kind of random in some sense, but we don't like the computers doing it randomly. We want us to do it. So I don't know. There's a whole, maybe a whole different talk to have on computer versus human random. But anyway, respect random, son. That's the name of the game. So yeah. Anyway, I suppose I'll pinch it off for today. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.